Our first stop is the George Inn, where we're going to meet a local historian to tell us about the area.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
And you too. Lovely to meet you, Olivia.
Please educate me. I know so little about this area, even though I grew up in London. It's scary.
We're in the George Inn, the historic inn in Southwark. The current building dates from the 1600s, and there's parts of it that dates from the 17th century, the 18th century. People have been drinking, eating, enjoying hospitality here for many, many years, and the historic connotations of this place are just incredible. It was basically a pub, and also you could actually stay here overnight. Southwark was the main centre of people who were arriving in London or leaving London, going to places like Canterbury, for example, on pilgrimages. The horses would stay here. You'd have a lot of stabling for horses. You could get yourself a nice fresh change of horse from the George Inn. So these were the forerunners of the modern-day motel and the modern-day hotel.
And if we leave here, we go out onto the street.
Yes.
Where are we?
We're basically on Borough High Street, and we're right in the heart of historic Southwark. And then if you go a little bit further down, you're right on the River Thames as well. When the Romans arrived in the London area, that was 43 AD, they populated the north shore of the River Thames. But of course, having just conquered the entire Roman Empire, they were quite keen to see what was on the other side of the River Thames. So they built a wooden pontoon bridge, and they actually walked across here to Southwark.
So that bridge that they built as a pontoon bridge, would that be the sort of forerunner of modern-day London Bridge, or?
Yes, very much so. It was one of the first bridges to actually go across the River Thames. Eventually they decided to build one of stone, because that seemed like quite a sensible idea. But this whole area of Southwark started to be built up by the Romans and then carried on from there. Bishops of Winchester had their headquarters here. And the reason that they did that was in the days before the Reformation, before the 16th century, they were very powerful statesmen as well as being clergymen. They needed somewhere in London to have a base to stay. So they built themselves Winchester Palace, which is pretty much on the banks of the River Thames. And that was an enormous complex. They had a great hall, which you can still see to this day. You can still see the remnants of that. It had a cellar underneath where they stored all the wine. And in fact, there was actually a tunnel leading directly from the cellar right the way onto the banks of the Thames. One of the things that they got involved with, I have to say was quite interesting, was prostitution, believe it or not.
Wow.
It meant that they could still be, they were obviously just a small boat ride away from the city, if so desired, but they weren't actually in the city. The ladies, because they were actually under the auspices of the Bishops of Winchester, got known euphemistically as the Winchester Geese. And the local church was St Saviour's, which has since become Southwark Cathedral. They weren't allowed to be buried in the churchyard. So the actual clergy who made money out of their activities...
That's horrific.
Yeah. So they got buried in a little patch of land. And it was only when they were building the Jubilee Line extension that they found remnants of bones that they then went and forensically examined and realised that these were the bones of very young women, often with syphilis. They often were the bones of babies in there, prematurely born babies. And they realised that this was the actual burial ground for the Winchester geese.
Wow.
That had previously been completely denied a proper Christian burial.
Could you tell us a little bit about the sort of crime and punishment in the area?
People who were bawdy or badly behaved, even the women in the area, got locked up in what was called the clink.
So it was a mixed prison?
It was a mixed prison. It was probably one of the first ever mixed prisons.
Wow.
Not that that's a good thing. This was a prison where people could be in there for quite some time. Unless you had friends on the outside, you could starve in there. Well, it wasn't all prisons and misery in this area. Good old City of London banned theatres at one time, so this is why they set up over here in Southwark. You basically had over here the Globe Theatre, you had the Swan and you had the Hoe, and of course Shakespeare made his name by performing plays over here. And indeed it's said that plays were actually Shakespearean plays were performed right outside here in the courtyard. You've still got the wonderful feeling of the old Southwark, and you can lose yourself down all the alleyways and beautiful places like this, like the George. And then right slap bang next to it, you've got the Shard, one of the most innovative buildings in the whole of Europe.